Good afternoon, everybody. If you could take your seats, please. Can you please take your seats? Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I'm Lisa Dunn. I'm the current president for, 2019, I guess you'd call that, for the Women's Council of Realtors South Orange County Network. And this is Debbie Rose. She is the president of the Coastal West Network. And thank you so much for coming to this event today. You don't know how happy I am to see this nice full room. This is fantastic. And thank you for all of you taking time out of your day to come and join us. We're going to start off with the Pledge of Allegiance, but we're a little flag challenged, so we have Candy far over here, our human flag. And if you could all rise, and Debbie's going to lead us.
Okay, ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay.
It's always nice that somebody happens to be carrying flags with them. So at this time, we would like to introduce some of our special and distinguished guests. I'm going to let Debbie go ahead and start with that.
Okay, so we want to introduce our board, and my Coastal West Board, if you could stand if you're here and introduce yourselves, or I'll point out. So it's Suzanne Janeau, and a lot of my board isn't here, apologize for that, but Gina Sanders is my secretary, and Suzanne Janeau is my director of events.
And I would like to introduce the members of my board that are here. That would be Lori Namazi, right over here, my right hand. And Bridget Salampessy, if you'd stand up, she is our secretary. And we were hoping to have Mary Van Dorn with us. She's our treasurer, but she was unable to make it due to a family situation today. But thank you to all of our board members and our members. We appreciate everything you do, and I mean everything you do. So we're very happy that you're here. And also, Debbie, would you like to do the past presidents?
Yes, our past presidents, if you can stand, we'd like to acknowledge that you're here.
Both networks?
Yes, South and West.
Why don't you go ahead and introduce yours, and I'll take mine.
Okay.
We'll stand for, we're not done yet.
Jean Teagan.
Past local president and also state president in 2006. Women's Council of California.
Oh, Suzanne.
And I was past president, I'm not sure.
Is that how we get?
Vice president and district vice president for the state. Thank you.
I'm Marielena Banks, and I started the South County chapter in '98, and I was president in '98, '99, and 2006.
Karen. Oh.
Karen Field, and I was president of South Orange County Network 2017 and 18.
Joyce. Okay, and do we have any more Government Association of Realtor Officers?
I think we have Tony Capitelli. And you are the AE at, help me, because I want to call you Tigar, but I know that has a name. Okay, he's the AE at Tigar. And I would like to do a special thanks to our sponsors. And I have got to, some of you have really helped me out at the last minute here. So my thanks to you all. And if you haven't had an opportunity to go back and visit with the sponsors that are here, please do after the event is over. We'd love for you to be able to talk to all of them. Our platinum sponsor is Connecticut Federal Credit Union. The Marzenki lending team from Movement Mortgage. Orange County Realtors, Corner Escrow. We got a little 2-for-1 here, Namazi Real Estate Resources and Laurel Real Estate Resources. Woo! And Coast Cities Escrow. We have a special thanks for our parking sponsor, Brookfield Residential, and our centerpiece sponsor, My NHD. Okay, so at this point, I would like Mike Lynch from Connecticut to come up here and join me. Thank you very much, Debbie.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And we're going to get this show on the road. What? Oh, you know, we forgot Rita Tayanaka. Rita, you are a past OCAR president. Little slip here. So was Maria Elena Banks. You know, it's hard. We got a full room. It's hard to remember who everybody was. So anyhow, okay. So Mike, come on up. This is Mike Lynch. He is, get in this microphone. Tell everybody what you do.
I'm the area sales manager for Connecticut Federal Credit Union. So overseeing basically kind of Los Angeles down to San Diego. A little louder. Gotcha, thank you. And we specialize in doing all types of lending. Obviously, we do your standard lending, but we have a unique kind of portfolio product that we do, which is kind of, I don't want to use the word relaxed guidelines, but it's portfolio lending, so we make common sense decisions on that. And we've also introduced our construction lending program, where folks are going out and buying houses and either tearing them down or doing remodels, and we're financing through the construction process and also then rolling it into a permanent loan at the end.
All righty, thank you, Mike. And I forgot somebody. He's not here, but he's one of our favorite people in the whole world. I'm sure all of you guys know Aaron Rosen from ARC 23 Insurance. Little shout out to him. He would have loved to have been here, but he had to go to Hawaii instead. So he wasn't able to join us, but if you ever have a problem with insurance, he's definitely the guy to call. So little shout out to Aaron. So at this point in time, I think, Mike, we're ready to start introducing our panelists. So once you hear your name, come on up and we'll be ready to start this. Okay.
All right, please welcome Dr. Jessica Lautz. Dr. Jessica Lautz is a Vice President of Demographics and Behavioral Insights at the National Association of Realtors. The core of her research focuses on analyzing demographic trends for both NAR members and housing consumers. Through management of predictive analytics, surveys, focus groups, and data analysis, she presents new and innovative ways to showcase results. Jessica discusses research findings in major media outlets and international presentations.
A little bit more on Jessica, too. She received her doctorate in real estate from Nottingham Trent University. She also has a master's in public policy from American University and an undergraduate degrees in political science and law and justice from Central Washington University. And I've had the pleasure to hear Jessica speak numerous times. She probably thinks I'm stalking her at certain events, but she is really great to listen to because she brings a different, fresh perspective, something that we don't always hear all the time. And something else I love to do is watch her travels and her cats, something that she posts on Instagram. So, and she's generously agreed to stop on her way to NAR. She's, came in on a flight from Miami last night. She's taking off for San Francisco as soon as we're done. And we're so pleased to have her as this is her first Orange County appearance.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, our next panelist is Fidel Lawandi. And he is the assistant professor and director of the Hoag Center for Real Estate Finance. He's part of the clinical faculty at the I'm going to ruin this name. How do you say that? Okay, you just heard him say it.
Just say the business school.
The business school, okay. And he has expertise in corporate finance, investments, valuations, real estate finance, and real estate forecast. Well, I guess we're going to see how well that works out. Mike has a few more things to say.
Mr. Lorena has over 16 years' experience in the financial industry with extensive expertise in banking, credit management, commercial residential real estate acquisition, financing, business lending, mergers and acts, quantitative and qualitative analysis, and research and portfolio management. He retired as guided portfolio manager from Morgan Stanley Smith Barney to join Hunter Wise Financial Group, LLC. He's the co-founder and past president of Hunter Wise Capital Partners, a Hunter Wise Financial Group, LLC company dedicated to the creation and management of opportunity funds. He is also a managing director of Hunter Wise Financial Group, LLC.
And he does a few other things too. He does have a life beyond all of those letters that we just heard. He is the hardest person to ever get a lunch date with. I've been, how long have we been trying to do this?
I think it's since the last Throwdown.
I think it's been a long time, because I love picking his brain, because he always has a really interesting way of looking at things. I always kind of call it my Fidel fix, just trying to find out what he sees out there. He is probably the biggest doting father you will ever find. His child is the best child on the face of the earth, I want you all to know. And we can't help but thank you for letting arranging for Chapman to host this event. This was all Fidel here, so thank you, Fidel. Okay, well, and he had some help, but we'll hear about her later.
The brains and the looks behind the operation stands right there. It's all Kennedy. Thank you, Kennedy.
Please welcome Logan Mohtashami. Logan Mohtashami is a financial writer and blogger covering the U.S. economy with a specialization in the housing market. Mohtashami's work included frequent quoted in Bankrate.com and Bloomberg Financial. Mohtashami has been invited speaker at the American Catalyst, California Association of Realtors, and the National Association of Women in Real Estate Business and other economic conferences. He's a recurring guest on Bloomberg Financial, where he discusses the health of the housing market.
And if you're anywhere on social media, you have to know Logan, because that's where he lives. That's his house in social media land. He is perhaps best known for his you're using big words in your bio here. He likes to predict what's going to happen quite a bit, and he does that weekly, I think, on Bankrate.com, correct? Okay. And if you do not know him on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or LinkedIn, you probably are one of the rare ones in the room. You might want to follow him after this. He's on all the social media channels. You can catch his predictions, his takes on the market, but you're also going to be very jealous of all of his foodie posts and his travel posts. So warm welcome to Logan.
Welcome Stephen Thomas. Go. Stephen Thomas, a California real estate broker with decades of real estate experience and a degree in quantitative economics and decision sciences from the University of California, San Diego. Developed reports on housing and is considered an expert in real estate housing reporting and trends. Reports Housing was started in 2004 as a way to communicate what buyers, sellers, and real estate professionals were experiencing in the trenches, tracking demand, inventory, distressed homes, and market data, both in the county and city levels.
And a little bit more on Stephen. He's been utilized and quoted by the Orange County Register, Los Angeles Times, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, USA Today, Bloomberg, Fortune Magazine, Orange County and Los Angeles Business Journals, ABC, CBS, NBC, Cox Cable, KNX 1070, KFI 680, blogs and internet news sites. Did we leave anything out, Stephen? Okay.
Did Chapman University Economic Forecast.
Okay, Chapman Economic Forecast, okay. And he's also served on the Orange County Association of Realtors as a director, and him and I served together on the Member Benefit Committee for 4 years. And he has his own personal Brady Bunch going on. Actually, he puts the Brady Bunch to shame. Him and his wife, TJ, are raising 9 children, 9. And yeah, Brady Bunch has nothing on them. And he loves to run, probably trying to run away and get away from the kids, but we're so happy that Stephen's here today. And the moderator.
And our moderator, please welcome John Lansner. Jonathan Lansner has been the Orange County Register's business columnist since 1997 and has been a part of the newspaper's coverage of the local business scene since 1986. He's a native New Yorker who is a past national president of the Society of American Business Editors and Writers and a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton Business School.
Okay, and John lives in Trabuco Canyon in a house that he actually owns, because if you read his column in the Register, you kind of wonder what he thinks about homeowners sometimes. But John and I have a lot of interesting conversations about many things, but he's one of my friends, and even if he is a Ducks fan, that's going to be another throwdown for another day, a little hockey throwdown with John and I. But he also loves to umpire local lacrosse games, and some that aren't so local. But you know, he has a great column, and he even got us a pretty cool write-up in the Register yesterday, so we thank him for that. But he is going to be our moderator. And John, what do you have in that bag?
Well, I thought it might be a little bit tough, so just so everyone knows who's in charge, I'll put my...
And you got a whistle too?
Got a whistle?
My goodness.
Just let you take it from me.
Okay.
Well, thank you guys for the kind introductions for all of us, and welcome to another Throwdown. I think back to last year and how many things that we thought were truths a year ago were 100% false, though Logan will tell us otherwise. Anyway, I guess we are starting in some order that I'm not aware of, but people will be presenting from this spot. So whoever knows that they're first will come up and start. But I do want to warn the panelists first that I do have the whistle and cards. So hopefully you can realize if I tell you we're getting long on time, and please stop.
All right, perfect. Thank you. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you guys so much for the warm welcome. It's really exciting to be here. And I'm super excited that I can make it on the way to San Francisco. So I don't have much time. I'm going to jump right in. I'm going to go quickly, but here we are. Okay, this is your only macroeconomic slide that you will actually see from me. What we have in the US right now is 91 months of year-over-year price growth. And this is completely unprecedented. We've never seen this before, and our data actually dates back to the 1960s. We've never had this long of years of expansion in home price growth. What we also see is about 4 months of supply, and that's kind of laughable when we think about supply today, when we look at this market, when we look at other markets. I'm in the DC market with HQ2 coming. We do not have 4 months of supply. But what that really means on a nationwide scale is that every home that's out there today for sale would be sold within that 4 months. So even that smelly cat pee home that no one wants to bring anyone to anymore, that home is sold too. You guys know which home I'm talking about. It has the shag carpet. You can't get rid of the smell. That one does. Okay. All right. What we also know is that we have a suppressed level of first-time home buyers. First-time home buyers cannot get into the market. We've been talking about this since the recession. We have been talking about this for a very long period of time. And we're leaving a lot of people out of the housing market. When we look at the housing market today and we look at the homeownership rate by age, something that's been talked about quite a bit right now is the homeownership rate for those who are under the age of 35. And it had been a peak of 43% during the boom area. We had a lot of young adults in the housing market. And today it's at 36%. In recent quarters, it's been ticking up a little bit. We're still leaving all of these Americans behind. And where are they? We know they're in our basements, in our attics. A 26-year-old lives in my basement. Yes, I get you. But they're also renting, and they're doing a lot of things a little differently. I'm going to talk about that. When we look at the race in homeownership, we can see that we've left out a lot of Americans from the #1 way to build housing wealth. And we're leaving out African Americans and Hispanic Americans at unprecedented levels. In fact, if we look at the African American homeownership rate, it's essentially unchanged from 1968 when the Fair Housing Act started. That is a really shocking figure, and it's really disappointing when we think about that. The other thing that we know is that first-time homebuyers are entering the market completely differently than they have in the past. And they're doing so, and it mirrors this drop in marriage rates overall. When we look back at the 1960s, 70% of American adults were married. Today, just half. People are skipping the wedding ring. They don't need to get married. They don't want to get married. they're walking away from marriage, whatever the reason is, they're not married. But they are entering homeownership, and we hear that household formation goes with marriage, but it doesn't necessarily ring true, pun intended there. When we look at this data, what we see is that there is this big drop. And there's a rise, though, on the flip side of single females, single males, unmarried couples making very large financial purchases without a wedding ring. The other share that we're seeing increase, roommates, people who don't have romantic partnerships, and they're saying, I'm going to go buy this house as like a Golden Girls phenomenon here and go and purchase this home with my roommate. The other thing that we see and what we hear a lot of is because people aren't having babies, and they're not. We're at a 30-year low in birth rates today. What they are doing is they're purchasing homes without children in their home. And this is fascinating when we look at this. Back in the 1980s, 58% of people who purchased a home had kids under the age of 18, and today it's just 34%. That is a massive shift. That's a massive shift of how much space we need, what neighborhood is important, how many bedrooms we need. Do you actually care about things like schools and yeah, okay, that was pretty controversial, so please don't quote me on that one. But we also, obviously we care as a society, but perhaps that particular home buyer doesn't care for their own buying purposes, maybe for resale. And the other thing that we have been talking a lot about at NAR is student loan debt. It's one of the big hurdles that's holding a lot of people back from entering the market. And when we look at this, it's $1.5 trillion. It's increased 150%. People who are making on-time payments on student loan debt, one of the most shocking figures that I have is that people who are making on-time payments, 47.5 of them owe more next quarter than they did this quarter because they're in a negative amortization loan. Yeah. All of us who work in housing know exactly what that means. That is a really, really bad thing for the U.S. economy. They want to be homeowners. They can't get there today. They expect their delay to be 7 years. That's probably pretty optimistic when we think about 7 years, the inventory, is that going to improve? The other thing that we know is that you have student loan debt, you actually purchase a home that's 19% less, even controlling for household income, even controlling for the home size, where you are. And that really is a big factor today when we look at buyers. But they're entering the market, and what we see is that they're doing so with mom and dad's help. 1/3 of first-time home buyers today have financial assistance from parents. And this is a really fascinating trend because what we see is that there is enormous wealth divide in the US today. And the wealth divide is really driven by a housing divide between who can enter the housing market and who can't enter the housing market. And we see that this wealth is passed through families, and they're doing so. Many first-time home buyers are entering the housing market with family assistance. It's that way to overcome their student loan debt. It's that way to overcome high rental prices. And the other way is that they're moving directly from their family member's home into home ownership. So my little sister tells me that she's saving for a house. She's not. She's spending it on Ubers and going out on the weekend. But if she was, she would be in that 23%. She's not. So what we do see is that there is this shift, right, between families taking care of each other in this much different way than they have historically. And it's really back to a way that has been traditional, these multi-generational homes. And this is one of the most fascinating stats that I've seen in recent years, and this I think is all fascinating, obviously, but the really fascinating one that I've heard in the last week is that for the first time in 160 years, the number of people living in a house has gone up. Yeah, with all that drop in birth rates, who's living in that house? Right? Who is that? It's a multi-generational home. It's people taking care of each other. It's adults living in that home, adults who need that space. That is a fascinating stat that changes home ownership. It's a fascinating stat that changes housing. When we look at multi-generational buyers today, we actually know that 1 in 6 Gen Xers are in that situation. They're taking care of aging parents, aging children who won't leave, children under the age of 18 who need to be there, obviously. But this is a very different way of living that we have seen historically, at least in recent years. When we look at tenure in home, what we've seen is that it's elevated drastically, and it's stayed elevated. Coming out of the recession, people were underwater, you refinance a loan, you lock in a low interest rate, you buy a bigger house because you're buying with a roommate, so you have that affordability to buy in the suburbs where you didn't necessarily before. And what we see is that people are staying put. They're staying put 9, 10 years, and they're not necessarily moving. And this is really creating this supply struggle as well as not building. All right. I think that's all I have for you. I think I did that. Maybe in 5 minutes. Probably not. Okay, thanks.
Someone's back to the future.
All right, okay. I like to walk around. I hate podiums, but we'll do it. All right, let's first talk about Orange County housing supply. I've seen a lot of green shoots. Remember last year I was talking about cracks? It's because I've seen lots of cracks starting in the marketplace around March of last year. And then we came to an eventual screeching halt by the time we got to the fourth quarter. This year I'm seeing green shoots, the exact opposite of what everybody's talking about and hearing about. If you look at the active listing inventory, this is where we are today. This is where we were last year. There were a lot of people, I had reporters, not the Orange County Register, other reporters that were contacting me saying, hey, Stephen, how come so many more homeowners are placing their homes on the market? They thought that's why the inventory was growing. That's not what was happening. Instead, we had homes that weren't going into escrow and lingering on the market. The same number of homeowners were coming on the market, just about the same number come on every single year within 3% here in Orange County and Southern California as well. So we built that inventory last year because we weren't placing them into escrow at this time of the year. But not this year. You could see we've done the normal thing and we are coming down fast. 5 days ago when I did the crunching of the numbers, I got to 5,921 homes. That was shedding 8% in 2 weeks. It was the largest drop so far this year. And then since end of July, we've shed 1,680 homes, and that is the largest drop since 2008. These are the kind of stats that you're not hearing about out there. You're instead hearing all the other news. Last year, 7,231 homes in the market. That's 22% more homes compared to where we are today. So here's another green shoot right here. Now I'm comparing this year's inventory compared to last year. It's the first time in 16 months that there are fewer homes now on the market than the prior year. For 16 months straight, it was more homes in the market compared to the prior year. But now, new trend has emerged, and that is fewer homes than the prior year. And that will continue for some time. This is the difference from this year to last year. Orange County housing demand. We went from a buyer's market at the beginning of the year. It was only a slight buyer's market, and agents and everybody, they were all mad at me for calling it a buyer's market. And here's how I explain a buyer's market. If you're on the market for 90 days and you kiss the feet of the buyer that brings you an offer, that is called a buyer's market, the act of kissing the feet of a buyer. Yes, that was a buyer's market. So we shifted out of that. Thanks to low interest rates, we shifted to a balanced market pretty quick, and then interest rates kept on going down, and it drove our market. We shifted to a slight seller's market, which is where we've been operating today. This year has been a slight seller's market compared to prior years, but there are green shoots that are emerging there as well. As you can see where we are today, demand hasn't changed much since we peaked back in April. It's been pretty flat, but the flat has proven to be really strong for our market long term, and it's positioning us for a strong start to 2020. And you could see 5 days ago we were at 2,275 pending sales over the last 30 days. That's what I call demand. It's the velocity of the market. We were up 1% in 2 weeks. Sometimes we go up a little bit in the month of October, and that's what I refer to as October Housing Fest. There are a lot of agents that say December is my best month ever. It's my best month. I always do really well December. You're not alone. There are families like mine, we can go ahead and move during the holidays because that is halftime for our schooling. It's in between semesters. I can actually move a family in between. So that's why a lot of people have a good December. Last year, not so much. This is where we peaked. It was back in April. But from that peak to the yellow arrow, it's the smallest drop from the peak in demand to where we are today since 2008. Which is telling because as we've driven through this year, interest rates have actually been pushing us, and it's the fuel that has been saving the market this year. We've thawed out of that the 5% interest rates that we had last year at this time. Last year, we were at 1,857 pending sales for a 30-day period. That's 18% fewer. So you see 22% more homes on the market, and demand was down 18%. So it's a supply problem again. We went from a supply problem that everybody was talking about to a demand problem. Her lemonade was too expensive with 5% interest rates. But once again, now we have low interest rates, and what we're going to be talking about next year is a supply problem. It is an absolute issue. It's going to be the forefront of what we talk about. So this is the expected market time. You could see this is where what we did in the last 2 weeks is actually a very large drop. There's an 8% drop in the expected market time in a 2-week period, and that's not typical. So that's what I wrote about in the report that came out on Monday. But you see, this is that line right there at 120 days is where it becomes a buyer's market. And below that green line, it's where it's a seller's market. In between is balanced. We operated balanced for a little bit this year, just as tiny at the very beginning, as well as a short time in July. But since then, we've actually been coming down. The market's actually getting stronger right now in the month of, at the end of October and through November. And this is where we were last year. The reason that spiked, and that's not normal, usually the expected market time stays the same from about August all the way through the end of the year. The reason it didn't last year is because we had demand falling and the inventory rising during this time period. And when you have that, it's a recipe that lines up in favor of buyers. And right now, today, Orange County is at a 78-day expected market time. It was 82 days 2 weeks ago. Southern California is at 79 days. It's the first time that Orange County has beaten Southern California in the past 18 months. So actually, Orange County is starting to get a little bit hotter than where we've been. And Orange County last year at this time was at 117-day expected market time. So look, 78 days right now versus 117 days last year. So here's what my forecast looks like for next year. Distress remains flat, return of the unrealistic overpriced seller, normal housing cycle, but muted activity compared to 2012 through 2017. It's actually going to be better than 2018 and 2019, but not as hot as 12 through 17. And we're going to start off this year with a lot fewer homes on the market. About I think it's 24% fewer homes in the market to start this year compared to last year. That is not enough homes in the market. That's that lack of supply that we're all going to talk about right out of the chute in 2020. Rise in active inventory, I put between 6,750 to 7,250. That's for Orange County, and which is not a lot of homes. Mild appreciation in 2019, up 2 to 4%, mostly realized in the first half of the year, which is where we do a lot of our appreciating of our local assets. Why? Because that spring is when we get our biggest rush. So 2 to 4%. And then upper range is slight thaw in spring, still muted activity, especially sluggish midsummer on. And that's everything below $1 million is going to be selling a lot faster than, of course, above $1 million. And a slight increase in domino sellers, and closed sales, I believe, are going to be up 4 to 6% compared to 2019. So a bit better than where we are today. And that's it.
Equipment. I think next year we should have it somewhere else. This is so unacceptable. Just kidding. First and foremost, welcome to Chapman University, all. We're happy to have you here, and hopefully next year we'll meet at the same place, same time, same date. I'll focus today more on the economics and kind of the macroeconomics, what's happening, where we think things are going to go. And first and foremost, I have to tell you, last year when we had the economic throwdown, most of us, well, with the exception of Logan, if I remember correctly, we said that we're going to see interest rates go up. And that's effectively what everybody anticipated because the economy was doing really well, inflation was at a healthy level, and the Fed effectively said what? We're going to keep on increasing interest rates because we don't want an overheated economy. And what we observed effectively beginning of 2019 on through the year is that the Federal Reserve started reacting not to economic factors, but what? Policies. What's happening, right? Policies, whether the trade wars, whether the stock market is doing well or not, and that effectively have guided their decisions throughout 2019. So having said that, where do we see 2020 heading? So first and foremost, if we look at real GDP, so this is growth of the economy without any impact of inflation. So where we see GDP overall is that next year it's going to be a little bit lower than what we're seeing this year, but overall there is no signs as of right now of recession or any kind of recessionary impact. We're going to see that inflation is going to pick up a little bit, and that should be expected because interest rates are where? Interest rates at all-time low. Effectively, the Federal Reserve has created quantitative easing, but they're not calling it quantitative easing. If you say quantitative easing in front of any of the Fed members, they will frown at you and say, no, we're just reacting to the marketplace. But they're pumping significant amount of cash in the economy, and that will have to translate to some form of inflation. So we're going to see inflation overall spiking up compared to next year. Nothing too crazy, but we are going to see inflation go up. That's good news for you because that means that home prices are going to go where? Up. How much? I'm going to leave that for Stephen to predict. Okay, we'll leave it for somebody else to predict. And the fueling, what's going to fuel the GDP, what's going to fuel the economy, is the same stuff that's been fueling the economy in 2019. We're going to see that it's mostly going to be driven by consumer spending. It's going to go down a little bit from where we are right now, but it's mostly going to be us continuing to spend. Because while everybody else is freaking out, including businesses cutting down on their spending because of the trade war, we, the consumers, have been doing what? Just having a blast, effectively, shopping as there is no tomorrow. And it's expected. Why? Wages are growing at a healthy rate compared to the... Bear in mind, we're in the longest recovery in U.S. history now. If formerly, we are in the longest recovery of U.S. history. So unemployment is at all-time low. Wages are growing. Our paychecks look a little bit nicer because of the tax reform, depending on how much you make. But overall, this is fueling the spending. Okay, so we're going to see that consumer spending is still going to be the driver of the economy for 2020. Government spending is going to be the same way, although again, we're going to see a little bit of a retreat from this year. Why? Well, because what is the government busy doing right now, the federal government? At each other's throat, impeachment, you did this, you did that. It reminds me when I used to go pick up my son from preschool. He hit me, no, he hit me first. It's like y'all just need to go to jail and we need to hire new politicians all across. Both Democrats and Republicans, so, you know, equal opportunity here. So government spending is gonna, is gonna effectively get distracted. If we could get all the, excuse my French, BS out of the way in early 2020, we might see government spending at a bigger growth than the 1.5%. But at the rate we're going right now, we're probably gonna see that government spending is actually gonna get cut down as they get, busy with impeachment and elections and all that fun stuff. Private investment, that's business investments. And by the way, in this private investments number is when people acquire homes. So when you sell a home on behalf of a seller, or you help someone buy a home, that number is in here, okay? If we look at just the businesses, so we exclude out, take out the people that are buying home, the numbers are much lower than this. Businesses have come to a halt when it comes to investing in new capital and expanding. They're hiring people, they're accommodating the marketplace, but they're making no plans whatsoever to expand their businesses because of effectively the trade wars and what the weariness associated with effectively not being able to get their product and services outside the U.S. So they're accommodating the U.S. market, but nothing beyond that as a result of the trade war. But you tack on the home purchases, and that's what gives us kind of the trend that we're seeing here, is that private investment is still going to be most likely fueled by people buying homes and a little bit of business investment, but overall, the number will substantially go down. So as of right now, most of the driver to next year's economy is going to be consumer spending and a little bit of the government spending. Private investing is not going to go anywhere as it relates to businesses, but home buying is what's going to keep that number in the positive side of things. Net exports, we're predicting as of right now, the way kind of the tarot cards are reading, is that we're most likely going to have a resolution to the trade war by the tail end of this year, the beginning of 2020. But if that doesn't happen, it will happen in October. Why October? Why are we so precise in about October? the October surprise, right? What's the October surprise? It's when one candidate comes out with something that will kind of effectively shock the voter population or the voting population into voting their side. Last cycle, what was the October surprise? Not Hillary. It's relating to Hillary, but it was the Comey letter to Congress saying what? Hey, by the way, we found more emails. So this cycle, we might have an October surprise and, hey, we figured out everything with China. But the rate that things are going right now, we might have a resolution much earlier in the economic cycle or the calendar cycle. If that occurs, then we're going to see the net exports, which is the difference between these two columns here, the net exports shrink, and that's going to give us the other part of the upside that will push GDP up. Now, if we don't have a resolution to the trade wars and private investing kind of wobbles and consumer spending kind of starts wearing off, then we might have a whole different story. But as of right now, that's kind of what we're looking at overall as it relates to the driver of the economy. And then the labor market, we think the labor market is going to continue to be at a healthy level of about 3.6, 3.7. What's interesting is that despite the fact that we're seeing unemployment nationwide at an all-time low, what's happening in swing states? It's actually going up, okay? Unemployment is going up, okay? So that's going to be very interesting to see what happens there. By the way, the unemployment is going up because jobs are lost, the job loss mostly in manufacturing and mass manufacturing and the industrial side of things. Because in those same states, when you look at the counties, when you look at it by county, the counties that are driven by technology jobs and quote-unquote white-collar jobs, you see that the unemployment numbers in those particular counties are significantly low compared to the counties where it's manufacturing and industrial type of jobs. So if we see a resolution to the trade war, what are we going to see happening to those unemployment numbers? They're probably going to retreat back to a healthy level. So it's very interesting to pay attention to what's happening in the swing states because that's going to have a significant impact on the outcome of the election as well in November. But nonetheless, unemployment is going to stay where it is. Job growth from a wage for hourly wage, we predict to be pretty much at the same level that we've seen in the last few years at that 3% average. So all in all, the labor market is going to continue to be strong compared to prior years. And lastly, interest rates. We see that interest rates are pretty much going to stay flat. We might see a little bit of a spike in it, nothing too significant or to write home to mom about. The Federal Reserve have already kind of put it out there that they're not planning to change interest rates anytime in the near future. They said that they are in a kind of change their policy to a policy of what? Effectively wait and see, right? And historically, has the Fed changed interest rates during an election year? Not often. They try to avoid when they can not to. Have they done it before? Yeah, they've done it before, but not as often as you would think because the whole idea is to avoid changing interest rates or appear to be manipulating the economy during an election year. So it'll be very interesting to see if we see rate changes next year. If we do see them, they're probably going to be in the beginning of the year. But overall, we see the interest rates are going to stay where they are. They might spike a little bit, but nothing, again, too significant. And I think that's my 5 minutes, maybe.
How is everyone doing? Good. How many of you were here last year? Do you guys remember how bearish people were? Mortgage rates were going to go up higher. Inventory had gone up. A lot of bearish talk out here. When people tell me mortgage rates have to go higher, I always ask why. We as a country cannot forecast bond market yields or mortgage rates for almost 4 decades, because I still believe that if you forecast mortgage rates, you have to tell people why they're going to go higher. And they have never, ever broken this down year trend for almost 4 decades. This is last year. It was very fortuitous in timing. Usually I do my prediction articles at the end of the year. I go on Bloomberg Financial. I take a lot of pride in them. But last year, November 8th, look at that. That downward trend was at the upper level. So it was the easiest time for me in my 20 years of finance to say rates are going to go lower, because it's the Y factor. You'll hear record-breaking growth, the Federal Reserve, QE, everything that drives mortgage rates. No. It is economic growth. Since the end of 2014, when I started incorporating bond market and mortgage rate forecasts, I've said the same thing every year. The 10-year yield will be in a channel between 160 and 3% this entire cycle until the recession happens. And the red line is the ISM Manufacturing Index. If I put world growth in that as well, or US growth, it looks the same. There is no super fast economy anymore for the US. There is no super fast economy for the world out there. A lot of our bigger, more mature countries have demographic factors that will reduce growth. Technology has reduced inflation, and $23 trillion in federal debt does not matter. That's been used as a boogeyman for, I think, almost 50 years, that interest rates have to go higher. No, right? This channel has stuck, and this year we got as low as 1.43%. So when we got to that low, has anybody heard of the inversion? Is it scary? Right? Typically when yields invert, it's the long-term rates and the short-term rates cross. Usually that means a recession is either 8 to 19 months out. At the end of 2017, I said, we're going to invert the yield curve in 2018, right? I don't believe the 10-year yield can break above 3%. I don't believe mortgage rates could ever break above 5%. You're more likely to see a 2 handle on the mortgage rates than a 6 handle in your lifetime, right here, because we are no longer a growth engine in terms of a growing labor force, a growing population, productivity growth has all been limited out here. So the next time somebody says mortgage rates have to go higher, or they're going to go back to 5 or 6 or 7%, something that I've heard for almost 2 decades now, ask them why. Why has it as a country we've been wrong about this? Growth is slowing down here in the US. V-shaped recovery. That's what I'm talking about with the housing market this year. Now, for the 2019, my existing home sales prediction was for slightly negative growth, little increase in inventory, nothing too bad. It's the same thing for 2018. Year-to-date existing home sales, slightly down. Inventory for majority of the reports are up just slightly out here, nothing too dramatic. But you can see here that at the end of 2018, we had a lot of drama, right? There was a lot of things happening, not just mortgage rates getting to 4.75 or 5%, but we had tariff man tweets. We had the Fed forecasting maybe 3 rate hikes in 2019, which was pretty comical. And we're just not sure what to think of the trade war, right? As a country, as business, we just don't know. Now, personally, for myself, I don't believe in the trade war thesis. I think it's smoke and mirrors. I think the days of trying to create a trade war are long past us. And I can tell you my evidence right here. All we are doing is talking about deals being made, right? We already did a deal with Mexico and Canada. We're trying to make a deal with China. If we really wanted to have a trade war, we would simply put tariffs on and let duration take its course. We would change behavior that way. But we're always trying to make a deal. So don't worry too much about the trade war. We don't even need a trade deal to have the economy grow next year. We just don't need it to escalate. And even if it escalates, it's limited if it's just with China. We're going to make a deal with Europe. Most likely, the Canada-US trade deal is going to get signed sometime in the next few months. We're going to be okay out here. But when you think of housing, existing home sales, V-shaped recovery right away from 2019. New home sales, same thing. New home sales last year toward the end of 2018 had a huge monthly supply spike. If you go back in the history of new home sales data and economic expansion, when you see a big spike in monthly supply, a big drawdown in builder confidence, a recession is not that far off. Now, I agree with that, with people that were telling me that, but new home sales are still very low. Housing starts are still very low. So the notion that we could collapse from this low level, not going to happen. So everything in housing looks fine. It looks normal. Existing home sales look fine. But the main thing is that we have the biggest demographic patch ever recorded in US history about to hit its first-time home buyer age. Ages 25 to 31 are the biggest. Median first-time home buyer age is 32. The nested equity created from home buyers from 2010 to 2016 is the best we've seen in 2 decades. And the loan quality is excellent, right? These are the best homeowners we've ever had in US history. Their cash flows are good. There's no exotic debt. There's no housing bubble, right? There's nothing out there to show for a housing bubble. Everybody talks about a bubble, a crash, or something's going to happen. I'm going to explain why we don't have that. This is real home prices on a year-over-year basis. Notice 2002 to 2005. See, that was record-breaking demand. That was speculation, right? Existing home sales got up to about over, I think it's 7.26 million. New home sales were over 1 million. That is what a bubble speculation looks like. This, and when I talk about adjusting to inflation or real home prices, it's the equivalence of rent and where home price is going. This is the Case-Shiller Index. This lags a little bit out here. But this is the most bullish housing chart I think I could find for existing home sales out here. Because what this shows is that this is not an overheating market. This is not an overheating economy, right? We are negative year over year on every single, the top 10 cities, the top 20 cities, and the national index out here. You want to see adjusting to inflation home prices stay like this. Nominal home prices are still rising, but if you could get this kind of price growth for the next 10 years, it's a blessing. My greatest fear was what we saw in 2013, that big spike. Everybody was talking, housing is a nirvana, here we go, best market in history, people are gonna buy homes. Interest rates went to 4.25%, 4.5%, kaboom. Purchase applications were down 20% year over year, people were freaking out then. Remember, you in Orange County have similar demand traits to the new home sale market. That means you are rate sensitive out here. So when people say, well, mortgage rates are gonna go up, bond yields are gonna go up because the economy is great, that should be great for housing, ignore that. You have to be mindful that when interest rates rise, with all these home price gains here, that will eventually hit an affordability wall. Now here in Orange County, obviously our homeowners are different. They make good money. They're college educated, dual households. We call them DICE, double income college educated households out here. They can still buy homes, but at some point, if 4.25% and 4.5% was the first wave where demand got hit, and 4.75% to 5% is the second, be skeptical of people that say if higher interest rates are good because the economy is better. For housing, it isn't. And again, going back to why did mortgage rates go down? Why did bond yields go down? Growth slowed down a little bit. Nothing bad, but we are a natural 2% economy. We're not the greatest economy. We're not going to grow at 4 or 5% out here. So, when you make promises and you speculate on things, then reality hits. I think after all the BLS revisions, GDP growth was only 2.5%. That is really good for a country with our demographics and our age out here. So we right now all of you are part of history. And what I mean by history is we have the longest economic expansion ever recorded in history. We have the longest job expansion ever recorded in history. We have the highest job openings print ever recorded in history. Just today, job openings hit 7 million. Again, that's 18 straight months of job openings above 7 million out here. The economy's fine. Don't fall for these investors, these gold bugs, these people who come on TV who talk about crash, 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 bubble, bubble. They're just marketing for clips. They don't have economic models. This is why this decade has been the worst decade for the American bears we've ever seen in US history, because they don't believe in economic models out here. So next year, I do my prediction articles at the end of December, but everything should be okay. I don't think we're gonna have a big growth new home sales, existing home sales. I think home prices adjusting to inflation, if they stay around this level, are going to be okay. It's nothing great, but be mindful that, as Jessica was saying about birth rates are low, and that's very true. We are about to have a big wave of people. You know, I always explain it this way. People rent, they date, they mate, they get married. 3.5 years after marriage, they have kids. We should have a little bit of increase of birth rates coming in the next decade. Home ownership rates, when I first started doing economics years ago, I said the home ownership rate should get down to 62.2 to 62.7. We got down to 62.9. But over the next decade, we should get up to about 66.21. Because why? Dual household incomes will trump any real bearish housing theme out there. And this is the benefit of the US economy. We have a lot of dual household incomes. When they get kids, if they live in a small enough home, they should be able to move up out here. So all in all, this year's fine. Next year's going to be fine. I've got a recession model that I focus on. So far, only 3 of my 6 flags are up. Until all 6 flags are up, I will never use the R word. My model, back-tested, going back to 1960, has never failed one time. Because if you believe in the purity of math, facts, and data, recessionary data is the easiest data line to call when all the variables come together out here. So we're gonna have another expansion year. But the last thing I warn about is the noise is gonna be terrible next year. Between the election, impeachment, China, Europe, everything, you are gonna get a lot of headlines. We still haven't even resolved Brett exit. That can move the markets, either the stock market or the bond market. Kind of ignore that, right? Focus on what the economic data shows and don't let the noise kind of move you one way or the other.
Well, thank you, panel, and certainly some interesting lessons, both backwards and forward, learned. I did want to start out as the official here of, and I told Steve already, I do have to card him for his one cheap shot at the media for saying, no one's reported this. I actually think to these days you cannot say that about almost any fact, including if, you know, there's a little Martian in Mission Viejo right now. Someone's probably reported it. So the fun thing about being the referee moderator is I get to ask some of the first questions before we'll get out to the audience. So I'm going to use just a, raise your hand and just check. But I assume, if I'm correct, that no one on this panel sees a bubble in the real estate market right now, correct? Can I see anyone in the audience here who thinks we have a bubble? Anyone? A couple of half hands went up a little. Okay. Second thing, how many on the panel think mortgage rates will be higher next year? The same next year? Lower, anyone? Okay. Who thinks they're going to be higher next year? Don't be intimidated by these people. Some of them were wrong last year. How many of them think they'll be the same or lower next year? Okay. And the last important question is home prices next year. How many of you think, whether we're talking nationally or locally, they'll be higher next year? About the same, a little? Anyone thinking home prices will fall next year? Out there, how many think they're going to be higher? How many think they'll be lower? Okay. I get nervous when everyone agrees about anything, so I just take it that way. I do have one question I'd like the panel to talk about, and it's a little bit of a longer-term question that was hinted about, is have Americans changed their opinion about homes and home ownership? There's been a long-running debate that home ownership isn't what it used to be, and that renting may be more popular for various reasons going forward. So I would like each panelist just briefly to talk about, let's say, where they see home ownership as a part of American life going forward. Start from the far side.
All right, great. I love this question, actually, because I don't think the American dream of homeownership is dead. There's been a lot of talk about that, but we do a monthly survey, actually. We release it on a quarterly basis, and we look at, is now a good time to buy? Is now a good time to sell? How do you see home prices in your community? What is your expectation? But then also a key there is the difficulty getting into the market. And what we see overwhelmingly is that the American dream is not dead. People want to own homes, especially non-owners. They absolutely think that this is my American dream. I want to do it in the future. The reason I can't get there today is because of finances and my personal finances, not because of finances necessarily in the economy, not because they think that there's any difference that could happen in the near future. When people make the decision to purchase a home, they're doing it from a very personal decision of they want home ownership for themselves, for their family. The wealth building aspect, they get it, but I think it's almost secondary, and it's so important, it's so crucial to home ownership. We all know it in the real estate industry, but it's something that people just want inherently. And it's not necessarily for their kids, it's not necessarily for their spouse, because those things may not be there. It's for themselves, it's for their pets, it's for whatever is their driver, their own kitchen to cook in at the end of the night, or make their HelloFresh or just order in. Whatever it is, that's the space that they want.
I'd like to piggyback on everything she talked about, including millennials. A lot of them don't even know that you can do better than a 20% down payment. You could do a 3.5% down payment. I kid, but I say it a lot in when I talk. I think 3.5% of all millennials know about 3.5% down. And it's up to us to educate them. They're very, very fearful of making the plunge. Everybody was at one time. So it's all a matter of educating and getting the word out that that they don't have to put 20% down. They don't have to save up, $200,000 to purchase here in Orange County. It's all myths, and we've got to do our best to educate the millennials, first-time home buyers.
I really think the dream is not dead. It's just that home ownership overall is a mature decision. You have to grow up first, then you make the decision, I want to buy a home. And the generation that we're seeing coming into the market right now, they're late to the maturing stage. They still want to drive for, not you, you're an old fart. No, I'm talking, think about it. They're preferring to drive for Uber and Lyft than get a full-time job because they want to be able to hang out with friends and do whatever. They're preferring to live in mom and dad's basement than to rent their own apartment, and I think everyone in this room has an example of that. And what's happening is that they're delaying that whole maturity process. They're delaying the responsibility process. That's why we're seeing more households with less children. They're still not willing to make the commitment to get married or whatever it may be. I belong to an organization where the average age of the members are in their late 60s, early 70s, and the story's the same. Graduated high school, joined the service, came home, married my high school sweetheart, bought a house, got a job, and we've been married for the last 50 years. Tell me, where's that story today? Graduated high school, tried community college, drove for Lyft, then it was boring, so I did Uber Eats, and then, mom and dad let me live in their basement and play, Mortal Kombat or whatever the new video games are on my Nintendo Switch and hang out with my friend. Decided to backpack through Europe.
Is this where we do the throwdown?
Yeah.
I really don't agree with anything you're saying.
Well,
I'm sorry, but it's the most educated generation in American history.
educated.
Thank you.
It might be educated degree-wise, but they are not mature enough to feel the responsibility of wanting to buy.
Affordability has to play a role here. Just because other generations want to take care of each other and are willing to let them live in their basement for not market rate rent doesn't necessarily mean that they don't want to buy a home, doesn't necessarily mean that they don't want to partner up.
In the last 7 years, I've thought about. No, that's completely fine. But the reality of the matter, the reality of the matter is, in the last 7 years, I've educated more than 2,000 students in this university. They've all graduated.
according
they all
to the
well
US
educated.
Census
Just
and
let
the
me finish my
personal
statement
consumption-
first.
okay.
And out of the 2,000, I would guess maybe 10 to 20% of them have decided to buy a home. And by the way, these are some of the richest kids in Orange County. So affordability is not an issue. The maturity is the issue.
Okay.
So if we look at the personal consumption data that's put out from the BLS, what we actually see is that millennials are actually working longer hours than every other generation. And they're taking on these multiple jobs, working for Lyft and Uber after they get off their 9 to 5, or they're working like 3 jobs to make ends meet. My sister has a best friend, and she lives in my basement too. I'm pretty sure she never leaves. But what I actually see is that she works 6 different jobs just to make ends meet. 6. That's insanity. That is complete insanity. And one of them's a realtor, because why not? But I think that I think that what we see is that hardworking Americans want to have this American dream. It's just out of reach.
Okay, I'm gonna chime in on this. I actually think.
You're a millennial, right?
Me? No.
Early stages millennial.
I'm a Gen Xer. I actually think this is fake news.
Yes.
I actually think the renting society that has been portrayed upon Americans is literally fake news. If everyone was making $200,000 and had 20% down, everyone would want to be a homeowner, right? So what's the difference between baby boomers and millennials is that, we go to college now. We graduate more people now than ever, which means that prime age labor force growth is high, but you're starting to do things much later in life. So you're not going to the war, you're not marrying your 50, sweetheart from high school. You're starting life, and women are making money now. And I think that is one of the most bullish things I remember at Desiree's conference 2 years ago. I said, women are graduating college faster than men now. Mm-hmm. Women are making more money in terms of the growth, in terms of prime age labor force now more than ever. This is a big deal. They can also wait on getting married. They don't have to get married at 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, right? They're going to school. Everything starts later in life. So if you want to talk about the renter society versus homeowners, start from age 32 to 38, right? Take people ages 25 to 29. Don't fully take them out of the data line pool, but people get married now at age 29 now, okay? So again, I go back to you rent, you date, you mate, you get married. 3.5 years after marriage, you have kids, you tend to own homes. If
All
you
the
can do
women
it.
are rolling their eyes in the room.
Yes. And part of the situation is that we have a barbell economy. We have certain jobs that pay really well, and then we also have an economy where the majority of the population living in 7 areas. In those 7 areas, it's expensive. So if you have a service sector job, okay, if you're making some kind of wages to that degree, you're not going to be a homeowner, right? Those are the people I think are renters for life, really, to be honest with you. But it's not like they don't want to own homes, right? They just don't have the capacity to own the homes. So if this renter society was ever going to take place, and I was the most bearish on home ownership rates out of anybody when this expansion first started, but I think we could get up to 66.21. I think when people start to get ages 30 to 39, you'll see that turn out. But California is expensive. Of course, when you go east, it gets a little bit cheaper. If you're working a service sector job, you're going to be a renter. You just cannot afford to buy a home unless you're part of a dual household income. I think that's the difference, is that during the baby boomers' time, dual household incomes was not a thing. Now it is. College-educated dual household incomes together provide, the best forces of buying power, and not only in this country, but if you compare American college-educated dual households, they are the best in the world out here. So I'm not a big fan of pushing that student loan debt is a crisis. I think majority of student loan debt is 70% of it is under $17,000. But those who finish college, who go out and work, and especially have a dual household income, they'll be owners out here. So I'm not too worried. The rate of growth, I think, is going to be the question mark. But if you're trying to put service sector workers into homeowners, it's just not going to work. right? If they were making wages like college-educated Americans were, they'd all be homeowners. Every one of them would buy a home. So be skeptical of this debate out here. If it's because you don't have the capacity to own, doesn't mean you don't ever want to own.
Well, thank you, panel, for that. Let me add my 2 cents, and if this was a group of home builders or developers, I might have this run on, but I think one of the big changes we've seen in the past 10 years is that the apartment builders have really been smart about building product that's new, exciting, and probably reaches that sort of group that's on the fence, so you can live a really nice, rental life where you probably couldn't have 30 or 40 years ago, and the home builders are still building the same old thing, and someday perhaps they'll build something new and exciting. Anyway, Lisa is out there with a microphone. The fun part is always letting the audience fire away, so are there any audience people brave enough with questions?
Thank you, panel. Parisa, Keller Williams Realty. I just wanted to ask you guys, none of you talked about, like Logan mentioned it, but none of you talked about what is your prediction about recession. So when do you see, because everybody in the news is talking about recession in the economy, so is it happening in 2020, 21, and what is the effect of it on the real estate?
So I'll take this because this is my pride and joy. If anybody's telling you a recession is going to happen on an X date, they're kind of full of it, right? We're a society of sensationalism where, come pay attention to me. I'm going to forecast a crash. This has been going on for a decade now. Now, I've created a specific model that has literally forecasted every recession since 1960. So far, it's 6 recession flags have to come up before I even say the R word. Only 3 of them are up. The last 3 are the big ones. And so far, 2020 is just not, we're not going to see that happen. Manufacturing growth, we talk about if mortgage rates could rise. If European manufacturing growth picks up and U.S., we've had 13 sub-negative manufacturing prints in this record expansion. It's one of the reasons why rates have been low this entire cycle. If that picks up, you'll get a little bit of increase in rates. Rates rising will not create the recession. An overinvestment in a certain sector, like housing or tech, an overheating economy, something where demand cannot be sustained and you have this big supply spike. We had that in oil. The oil rigs, they had a big production, oil prices crashed, they had a recession. It's not big enough for the U.S. because what the U.S. has an advantage over every other country, really, is that we have a really big replacement workforce. A lot of Americans are ages 51 to 67 are still working. They have about a 7 to 21 year lifespan, and then they're going to leave the workforce. We have replacement workers. Europe doesn't have this. Japan doesn't have this. Not even China even has this out here. So consumption will keep on going. Domestic investment will always be light. But as of now, until the 6 flags are up, no recession.
I'm asked this question a lot. So is Logan. Logan even puts it on his, I think in December, he asks you for your recession predictions, yes or no. No, not for 2020, I don't believe. I even think, what's funny is, that inverted yield curve, the guy that started that actually has walked it back. This year he said that we're gonna have a soft patch. It's gonna be 0.8% for the GDP. What basically he's saying is that he's right because we're going to have a slowdown, a soft patch, and that's not what he said before. What he said is it's an indicator that we're going to have a recession within 18 months, and he personally walked it back. So there's a lot of skepticism out there. Logan's right. You can't follow one single metric. If anybody's good at following many metrics, it's Logan. Just go to his Facebook posting and you'll see that there's like 16 metrics every single day. And you follow a lot, and it really does educate you when you're following a lot of different curves at the same time rather than hyper-focusing on one. I heard one person say that we're gonna have a recession because RV sales are down, and that has predicted the last several recessions.
Well, we have our economic forecast coming up in December, and we've been having this economic forecast now for 42 years. We've been accurate 40 out of the 42, and it was the first 2 that we weren't accurate on our prediction. So for the last 40 years, we've been on the dot. And we're not predicting a recession either for 2020. We see some early signs of potential there, but like to Logan's point, most of our indicators are still off, if you will, for a lack of a better word. So until we see some more movement to indicate that we're comfortable sitting here today, we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. We're comfortable with saying no recession. Having said that, in 9 out of the 22 recessions and depressions that we've had here in the country, 9 of them were as a result of policy and not economic factors. And policy in today's world is a coin toss, if you will, from one day to another, whether if we're talking about Congress or the White House or anything else. So all bets are off if somebody does something stupid as it relates to policy, which is not out of the question in today's political environment. But outside of something drastic policy-wise, we don't see any indication today that there is a potential for a recession in 2020.
And as the media person here, when I hear people say everyone is talking about, I think it's also a bit of a case of what you hear. People hear these days what they want to hear. So I think a lot of people, and I can prove to you with slides if I had internal data from my own place, is that people love reading and clicking on bad news. And if you want to change that, just click on the good news, and if all of you do it across the nation, we will just produce good news, but since we have to get paid, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Next question.
Wait, I think Jessica.
Jessica.
I'm sorry.
I was just going to say essentially what everyone else said, is that it's not in the NAR research forecast, that we're updating that on a very frequent basis. And we see GDP lighter for 2020, but we don't see a full recession in the future. Yeah.
I guess I'm going to have to referee the referee, huh? Okay, question.
I just want to make a comment that I'm usually very soft-spoken. I never get mad. The last time I got mad was when I was diagnosed with cancer. And I didn't get mad at the doctor or anybody. I got mad at the cancer. And I got so mad at the cancer that last 15 years I've devoted my life that if I hear somebody has cancer, I get next to them and we fight cancer so hard that doesn't come close to anybody that I know. Well, today, thank you. Today, after 15 years, I got mad again because it's enough to blame our young people. It's enough, being married 50 years, that's great, but do you know how many women got abused in those 50 years of marriage? And maybe some men got abused, but that's not the point. The point is we will have recessions, we will have prosperity, but the key is to be kind. The key is to help our young people. My son woke up at 5 in the morning, studied so hard to get to UCLA. He got to UCLA. He got a scholarship from USC, and I told him, don't go to USC for a couple of reasons. One was the location, and now I hear people pay $500,000 to get to USC. Okay, so these are our young people. He has done multi-million-dollar deals for Disney. Still his salary, he says, Dad, I can't really afford the gas. I can't. When you and we were young, the gas was, I remember I put gas 21 cents a gallon, 26 cents a gallon, and they would wash the car. How dare do you put down our young people? This is the best generation.
I'm not putting them down. What I said is that they're delaying a lot of the mature decisions.
I'm working with a young doctor right now. She has $475,000 in student loans. $475,000.
I completely understand that. My younger brother is a neurosurgeon. He has $500,000 in student loans, yet he was able to afford a house very comfortably. So I'm not saying that every single young person is is acting irrationally, and I'm not putting anybody down. But the reality of the matter is that this generation, and to Logan's point, that's why they're, wait until they're 30. It's wait until they're 30 is because they're delaying a lot of these mature decisions until that they're 30. Yes, some are a result of affordability, but as I mentioned, we have some of the richest kids in Orange County coming to the school, and they're still delaying the decision to buy a home significantly longer than what historically previous generations have done. So it's not, yes, affordability is an issue, but the reality of the matter is, overall as a generation, and I'm not saying every single person in a particular generation, but overall the generation is postponing these mature decisions, whether it's marriage, whether it's buying a home, whether, moving into an area where they could find a job and afford a home. They're preferring to stay at mom's, dad's house, or, their girlfriend's sister's basement. So that's the reality of it. And it's not an offense to any generation or putting them down. They're just delaying the decision, good, bad, or indifferent. They are delaying these mature decisions.
But there has to be more statistics and data done behind that. Just to state what you're seeing is one thing, but I love following actual stats. And some of the I've heard plenty of different things. I know that there are plenty of kids in their 20s that are approaching 30 that have saved a lot. They're actually skipping getting a condo or townhome, and they're going straight to the residential detached house. Those are the stats. You have to follow it though, but just conjecture and stuff that you're seeing out there, that just doesn't sell me. What's happening here in Chapman is just a small, minute number of people. Has to be cast across California, across the United States, and a lot of research like that NAR does.
Yeah, we do see that first-time home buyers have absolutely skipped the starter home. The starter home, the idea of it is gone. When people go to purchase their first home now, it's actually larger because it is a single-family home. It is in the suburbs, but that's where affordability is. We don't find affordability in the city centers, in the high-rise condos that are beautiful and will do everything for you with all the amenities, and you don't necessarily have your own kitchen anymore. That's not where affordability is. We see affordability in the burbs, and we see that when people go to purchase their first home, their thought of it is different. They're thinking that they're going to live there for 10, 15 years for their first home. And that idea before is crazy. It used to be historically people bought their first home. They'd think they'd live there for 5 years. They'd live there for 6. You'd move on to your next home. And that idea is gone now. And that makes everyone's job in real estate much harder because that turnover is so much slower. And we see it for both first-time buyers and for repeat buyers.
Okay, as the token millennial in the room, I'd like to ask a long-term question. So just to give you, I'm an open book here, give you a little rundown of my expenses, right? So I pay about $3,000 a month in mortgage. I pay about $1,300 a month in health care for my family. I have 2 kids. I pay $600 a month in student loans, and I pay about $1,300 a month in food. Right, and we don't go out much. We buy from the grocery store. I have a pretty good job. I was barely able to buy a home in Orange County. I live in Brea. What I see happening is sort of a sucking out of long-term wealth. Because of those increased compilation of expenses, people are saving less, and they're buying homes less, so they're not generating wealth. So what long-term impacts do you see from that standpoint, rather than 2020 predictions?
So I think when I hear economists talk about this at academic conferences, they actually give different scenarios of how we can rebuild this, how we can bring people back into the housing market, minorities and those who are under the age of 35. And the scenarios that they give are optimistic, pessimistic, and then California. Literally, those are the homeownership rates that they predict on a chart, and I've seen that before. And it is enough to make you gasp, right? Because you're here in the California market and you see it every day. You see that you have the lowest homeownership rate in the nation. And it's not necessarily just the minorities are buying homes at lesser rates, or we have a lot of young people and they're buying homes at lesser rates. Because guess what? Texas looks very similar demographically, and they have a much higher homeownership rate. So there's something else going on, and it's that affordability key that becomes that missing link, that density key. In this metro area, for every 11 jobs, there's only 1 house built. For every 11 new jobs, there's one house. And for those who make under $50,000 a year, so your school teacher who is a single woman, she can afford 1% of homes that are on the market in this MSA, 1%. That's crazy. We need school teachers, right? I mean, I said we don't have enough kids, but we need schools.
One thing about California that people don't know is that since 1975, California is the only state adjusting to inflation that has home price growth. So yes, it's everywhere else, and then there's California. And again, we've got 40 million people. We also have one of the biggest, youngest demographic patches, ages 22 to 30 in the world here in Southern California. A lot of them are in Riverside. So it's expensive here because why? Nobody really leaves, right? Everybody complains about California. They say it's horrible, it's awful, politics are bad, and none of them sell their homes to go to the Midwest or the South. And this is why we have 40 million people. This is why this is the fourth biggest economy in the world out here. That is a first world problem, really, because there are other areas that just do not have the economic output out here. And it is difficult to what everybody's talking about. We've been building bigger and bigger homes since 1975. The family sizes have been getting smaller and smaller. So the product that the builders have built since actually 1996 is perfectly suitable for one family to live in for the rest of their lives. So the housing tenure, some of it is economical in the sense you can't afford a bigger home, but you're building a product that is one and done, right? And turnover, right? Turnover sales out here. So if you're building a product that's one and done, most likely that person's going to stay. And this is with low interest rates, right? If interest rates ever got a little bit higher, it just makes that difficult, a little bit easier to stay home where your $2,400 square foot or 2,400 square foot house is suitable for your family of four.
And let me add a bit of news, is that the latest California home ownership rate is now at a post-recession high, and we're only the fifth worst now, so we're making progress.
Well, I think that the demographics in California are going to change. But what it's going to look like, it's going to be very interesting. And I would say the next 4 to 5 years, we're really going to define how California looks for the future. People do leave, but luckily for us, we have celebrities and famous people and sunshine and snow that everybody wants to come here. But people are leaving. The easiest way, and for statistics purposes, the easiest way to determine that, just sit down at your computer and see how much it costs for you to rent a U-Haul from here to Texas versus how much you could rent a U-Haul from Texas to here. From here to Texas, $600. From Texas to here, I found one as cheap as $97. Why? Because U-Haul is trying to get these trucks back here. Because there's more people that want to go to Texas than there are people that want to come back to California. So or Arizona. So yes, people are leaving here. And the nicest thing is that our weather, our demographics, whatever it may be, is causing more people to come to California. But what is that net gain, if you will, into California? What age group, what level of wealth? It will really kind of hinge upon what's going to happen policy-wise out of Sacramento for the next 5 years. That's going to dictate a lot of what California is going to look like, whether it's going to look like Florida or is it going to look like Palm Springs. So.
Hi, Darlene from First Team. This question is for Logan. You mentioned that 3 of the 6 flags are up to show that we're going into the recessions. What metrics have you based on to show for the 3 flags to go up? And what other metrics are you waiting for the other 3 flags to come up?
Well, economic cycles kind of trend the same way. The first 3 flags are relatively easy. The Federal Reserve actually starts raising rates, after a cutting cycle. That's an easy one. Unemployment rate gets down to a certain percentage. If you go back to 1960, for me, it was about 4.9%. That's a checkoff. That's a raised flag there. Number 3 was the inverted yield curve. Now, I'm a huge economic expansion person, but my main forecast at the end of 2017 for 2018 was for yield curves to invert, but also it would be the longest time ever between an inversion to a recession ever in our history. I believe we inverted the yield curve last December. So we're already almost at 1 year here. The last three are really the more crucial ones. Number one, I think this is the easy one, leading economic indicators fall 4 to 6 months straight before every recession, 1960. It is an index of a series of data, unemployment claims, permits, manufacturing data. It has always fallen 4 to 6 months before every recession. Not happening yet out there. It's stalling out, but it hasn't fallen. Housing starts typically fall before every single recession, or they have a trend sales. The duration time is different if you look back, going back to 1960. That scared a lot of people, actually. In fact, not only were housing starts looking negative, the rate of growth of retail sales were the lowest it's been in the 21st century early this year. A lot of people don't know that. If you look at control and retail sales, the rate of growth of retail sales, the consumer was really showing weak, but still, housing starts, even though they're negative year to date still, the monthly supply spike that we saw in 2018 has come back down to a more comfortable level. That's off the grid. But the last one, the main one, is where is the overinvestment? Where in the cycle do we see an overheating economy that demand is so strong that it's going to create a supply spike and people have to lay off people, right? So we see manufacturing companies laying off a few people out here. That's not big enough. We had a legitimate manufacturing recession in 2016 in America. It did nothing to unemployment claims. The economic cycle kept on growing. Growth slowed down a little bit. Rates fell. We had a recovery when oil prices recovered, and now we came back down. So the last three are the most important out here, and I track them every single day. And if there was ever a time where I saw the 6 recession flags, I'll write about it. I do FaceTime. I'll go on Bloomberg Financial. We're just not there yet. And this is the difference between people who have economic models than people who come on TV and tell you gold's going to 10,000 and the stock market's going to crash. Okay? That's the difference between marketing economic theory and actual people with models out here. So we're still good. Again, longest economic expansion ever in history, longest job expansion ever in history. So we still have some legs here, but those are the last 3 things that I'm looking for.
Guess nobody's going to say anything to Logan after that, except for Desiree. Question.
Hi, I'm Desiree Patno. I own Desiree Patno Enterprises and enter to be Women in Housing Real Estate Ecosystem. So I want to thank Lisa for inviting me. I think it's a fantastic panel. Vidal, I know, and Logan and several of you I know. Vidal, your comment about the maturity, I could not agree with you more. The impact here in Orange County, we have a mental health problem at 30-year-olds. And if you deal with the impact of what we're doing through is commitment, is what I believe the millennials are lacking. And this commitment not just to where they want to work, how they want to have tie down and things are getting done. If you think about furniture, you think about cars, you think about everything that's in the industry. And with that being said, I can attest to the cost of Chapman. My son's getting a master's here in accounting, double in finance and accounting, and it's the 3rd most expensive university in the United States. So I can second that. But the idea is that they don't want to be tied down to the responsibility of having a home. And they feel that marrying longer, women are graduating with more, higher debt. And the idea is that they want to have their own legacy that they can live. So the question I have for you is that how are we going to embrace the changes of mental health and the dynamics of what we have? We got aging population with the cognitive issues, that we're all living longer. Orange County is a great place to age out and age in homes. So the idea is that having a home as an aging place in the environment of a workplace, in addition to brick and mortar, in addition to home, and having multi-generational. So my question is, how does that play into your dynamics down the run?
Well, the fact of the matter is that, you know, these generations, if you look at the early millennials, the ones that are in their 30s now, you're starting to see that they're kind of starting to, or have already started to, buy the home, settle down, and if in fact some of them are actually caring for their elderly parents or their aging parents in their household. We see that builders are accommodating the extra space for multifamily generations. So it's not that hope is lost that they're never going to mature. It's just that it's later on in life. It's happening later on in life, and the dynamics is that to many of the comments that were made, is that you're just going to have to, the marketplace is going to have to create the product that allows for the multi-generation to live under the same roof. The elderly generation are staying in their home longer. I was at a medical conference not too long ago, and there was a paper that was presented by a researcher at Johns Hopkins that they figured out a way, at least theoretically, to reverse aging. So the reality of the matter is not only are we going to get older slower, we could effectively, go back to our teen years. Or at least, here you go. Everybody perked up to that one. So the reality of the matter is that the marketplace will have to accommodate. And as this generation has grown up, it is taken the responsibility. I'm seeing more and more of people in their 30s and their 40s and even in their 50s that are, taking in mom and dad instead of sending them to a nursing home. Last year we were covering Sabra, which is a healthcare real estate investment trust, and we did kind of an unofficial survey, and we surveyed the seniors here at Chapman and said, if your parents get older and they need to be cared for, what would be your selection? Send them to a nursing home, have them fend for themselves, or take them in? And over 90% said, we're going to send them to a nursing home. But then the follow-up question was, well, what happens when you get older? What do you expect your children to do? Over 90% of them said, we expect our children to take care of us. So that tells you that tells you all that it needs to tell you about this generation. They're just not thinking things through. I'm not saying that they're bad, good, or indifferent. They're just not thinking things through to kind of think forward 10, 20 years later compared to prior generations.
How are we doing time-wise? Anything on the panel want to add? No more trouble to start? Well, I want to thank the panel for being here. Lisa for having us and putting this together.
There we go. What'd you guys think? I just wanted to take a moment to thank our panelists. Jessica, thank you so much for coming here, and same with Stephen and Fidel and Logan. And hopefully, we're going to take a couple of pictures right after, but maybe if you have more questions, our speakers would stick around, except for I know Jessica has a plane to catch, but she's nodding her head, so if you have any questions, you can ask them. And I really, really want to thank our host. Hey, don't leave yet. We're giving away centerpieces, and we got a prize, so... But I really want to thank our host, Chapman University. This is so generous of them to allow us to use this facility, and this was just a wonderful event. So thank you, Chapman University. Now I need the Thelma to my Louise to come up here. We have a few thank you gifts we just want to give to our guests real quick. And we're going to start off the first one, since Lori's here holding this lovely bouquet. This is for Kennedy for helping us get this put together. So come up here and get a round of applause, because you deserve it.
She's just a star.
And we have gifts for all of our panelists. But again, thank you very much. Thank you, John. In fact, we have a gift for you you might like better than that pink whistle. So I just noticed that was pink. No. We got him a better whistle. And we have a couple of drawings. Dave, do you have? Yeah, draw from there. Okay, and we also have these fabulous centerpieces from My NHD, and we would like to give those away to everybody at the table. So I want everybody to count off right now. Who's at your table? Just pick 1, 2, 3, 4. Count off. Everybody figure out what their number is.
1, 2, 3,
Why are they counting their table?
Okay, everybody that's number 1 gets a centerpiece. And on that note, we are finished here. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
See you.
Thank you.
See you